live and preparing.
Hello.
And live,
guys.
and live,
Hello.
and live, and live. So, guys, good evening. Tonight we have some incredible people that we're very proud to have on our show. So, our show is 8 o'clock every Monday night, if anyone doesn't know. We've got the lovely Lisa Novak, of course, and the incredible Lisa Jemmeson and Steve Fisher. How are you guys?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Now, everyone, why it's so important that we've got these guys here tonight is there are a lot of questions as thousands of tenants, hundreds of thousands of tenants, that questions a prospective tenant, that tenants have, prospective tenants have, that landlords have, that employers have, and there is just not one source. It's very fragmented, and we thought, how good would it be to have an accounting firm, property centric, and a legal firm, property centric, to answer all of the questions that we have as a business and that we're getting asked as a business. And here you go tonight.
Phenomenal. Seriously, not only that, but these guys are going to, you cannot find this information anywhere. We've just been talking off air for the last 10 minutes, and I've just been asking 1,000,001 questions. Guys, this is a segment that you do not want to miss. There's a lot of information that's been coming out, particularly today and yesterday, from our government. These guys are going to put it into perspective for you, and we're going to answer any questions that you've got as well. I suggest right now you tag someone and you share this post, because this information is going to be invaluable. All right, let's get into it, because we don't want to use up any valuable.
Write it down as well. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out of this.
Critical info, not just real estate related, guys. All right, let's get stuck into it, because we've got lots and lots of stuff that we want to discuss with these guys. Where do you want to start? Lise, do you want to start?
All right. Well, let's look at what's happening in the rental market, because that's really applicable for real estate agents at the moment. So let's run through the residential side of it and then also the retail side of it as well. All right. Yep. So if you're not aware, if you're a property manager and you are not aware, the COVID-19 legislation amendment emergency measures bill has passed the New South Wales Parliament. Okay. Here is what it means for you if you're managing property that you need to be aware of. So it passed on the 25th of March. Via Schedule 2 in Part 13, it deals with the regulation making powers of the Residential Tenancies Act. Okay, so here's what you can't do. It prohibits the recovery of the possession of premises by a landlord from a tenant of a residential premises. Okay, so you're not kicking anyone out. It prohibits the termination of a residential tenancy agreement under the relevant act. And it regulates or prevents the exercising or enforcement of any other right of a landlord under the Act, under the Residential Tenancies Act. Okay, so if we're going to put that into real simple terms for everyone watching as well. Yeah, you can't kick anyone out if they haven't paid their rent. That's the grab line.
That's scary.
And there it is.
Scary. That scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it does if you're a landlord, Mark. It does if you're a landlord. But let's just wait, because there's a whole lot of steps to this.
So under this bill, you have identical measures under the Retail Tenancies Act as well. Okay, so it's going to capture your residential tenancies as well as your retail tenancies. Okay, right. So you need to start communicating this to landlords. Before you do that, let's look at NCAT. So NCAT is vested under the Residential Tenancies Act and your Retail Leases Act, is vested with the sole jurisdiction to terminate a tenancy. Okay. Now, there are carve-outs for interstate parties, like interstate landlords, and I'll cover that very quickly later. But they're the only place that you can go to have tenancies terminated. So what are NCAT doing? Well, first of all, NCAT are not hearing anything anymore.
Okay, so sorry, can we just explain, Lee, sorry to cut you off, for people that are watching, who is NCAT?
So NCAT is the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal.
Yep.
And this is where you have to go to get a tenancy terminated.
If you didn't know what you're talking about, you would be calling it court.
Well, you might be calling it court. And I use the term NCAT because if the parties to the dispute, so the landlord and the tenant, are in this state, you're going to NCAT.
Okay.
Okay? If you're out of state, I'll clarify it later.
Okay.
But from today, 30 March, NCAT hearings are only going to be heard by video link, by telephone link, or on the papers.
Okay.
And when you hear on the papers, that means the parties submit documents, the member will sit and read the documents and then make a decision. So they're not going to from anyone.
So the idea of the courtroom's gone. It's all done digitally now.
Yeah, but fallacy number one, because we had a staff meeting this morning and our property management team said, oh, NCAT is shut. Guys, not true. It's not shut. It's all being done virtually or by phone. NCAT is open.
Yep.
Correct?
It's open, but let me qualify that.
Okay.
It's open for some stuff, but not the stuff that real estate agents are interested in.
Okay.
So, if you have existing orders in place, so they might be directional type orders, and where this is going to kick in is if there's a bond dispute. So you go off to the first conciliation hearing, and then the tribunal makes orders that you've got to exchange evidence and how that evidence is to be exchanged between the parties. Yeah. That remains current, and they're the types of matters that could still be heard by video link or by telephone or on the papers. However, if you've got a brand new fresh case because your tenant is a month behind and you've issued a termination notice and you want the tenancy terminated and you want orders for possession, NCAT will not hear those matters. And they're not going to hear those matters for 6 months from the 25th of March.
But they will hear those matters eventually.
They will hear those matters. So let's now talk about if you're starting fresh proceedings against a tenant. So if you're a property manager and you're starting fresh, what type of applications will NCAT hear? They relate to if someone is in danger, the property is being damaged, or there's a risk to health. So a tenant, for example, could make an application that this property that I'm renting is particularly dangerous and I need orders against the landlord. They will hear those applications, not face to face, but they will hear those as fresh applications. But that is it. They are not hearing rent default or payment type applications.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. All right, I'm a tenant and I have lost my job. Do I stop paying my rent?
No, because it's analogous
so sorry, I just want to ask that again because we're getting asked this question many times a day. If I am a tenant and I've lost my job, do I stop paying my rent?
The answer is no, because you've signed a contract.
So what do I do?
Okay, so if you are a tenant, the best advice is to come in and speak to your agent or negotiate a payment plan with your agent. Under the contract, the debt still accrues, and it's analogous to a mortgage contract. So all the banks are not saying, well, look, we're just going to cancel the contract and we're going to forgive all the debts. They're just compounding the interest at the end. So they might be putting them on hold, but they're compounding the interest.
I like that.
There's no facility to compound or even charge interest in a residential or retail lease. So we need to be having conversations about what can you pay now and then what will fall due later. And that's really important.
So let's just be clear about that, guys, for everyone that's watching, because this has been the most asked question, I reckon, at the moment. Everyone's like, what do I do about my rent? What do I do about my rent? If you are paying $500 a week rent and you have come to an arrangement that your property manager has negotiated between you, the tenant, and you, the landlord, and you're only paying $300 a week, the shortfall of the $200 a week is going to accrue. You will be made to pay that. Correct?
Not necessarily lump sum, but the debt doesn't go away.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
So if you were watching last night when Scott Morrison gave his address to the nation, he was talking about negotiating. So parties getting together and negotiating. So it may well be prudent not to negotiate away rights under the contract, but rather put them off so that people know, look, I've got in a retail premises, I have a shop to come back to. And in a residential premises, they know that ultimately they'll be given the opportunity to stay in those premises because some people, have been there long term and they've put down roots. So it's important that they stay. So it's just about negotiating what we can do for the next period to get us through.
Correct. And also why you can't pay your rent, because we're going to cover that in a sec, Steve, with you, because something got passed down today that's super important about a payment scheme that the government's going to do to help people out, employers and employees. So if you're getting some sort of Centrelink payment, or you still have your job, or if you're going to be getting this new government incentive, we need to be able to adjudicate, well, why, if you're getting that and potentially your expenses are less than what they usually would be because everything's shut at the moment, why can't you pay your rent?
Yeah, that's right. But I think the advice to everyone is no matter what side you're on, and I imagine that the Novaks have got landlords watching today, tenants watching today, as well as real estate agents. So I think the key message from a litigator is, I don't know how this will taste coming out of my mouth, don't be too combative, and try and work something out.
Work it out. Yeah.
And
work it out.
Come to the conversation in good faith, not being positional, but just trying to get everyone through. So at the end of all of this, we've still got people in residential premises and people in retail premises, and we can try and get back on.
Try and work. Everyone gives a little bit, and then everyone wins, right? That's
Lisa,
the ultimate goal.
So Lisa Jemmeson, just to take it from the top.
Yeah.
There seems to be all that people are actually hearing is that you can't kick a tenant out for 6 months, and all the associations with that are, I don't think I need to pay my rent anymore. My rent anymore. I'm affected by COVID. But it's not the case at all. The case is that you do have a responsibility when you sign a lease. You will have a responsibility after the 6 months. So try to be as practical as possible with your real estate agent, with your landlord, through this process that they can all survive. Yeah.
Look, 100%, Mark. The residential tenancy agreements are still contracts, and the courts will always give efficacy to business contracts. So although we spoke about the tribunal, NCAT, having sole jurisdiction to terminate a tenancy, certainly in areas of the eastern suburbs and North Shore where debts on behalf of landlords may run, $80,000, $90,000, we may terminate an NCAT, but then we pursue the debt through the local court or the district court, depending on the jurisdiction. So the debt doesn't go away. It's going to be there.
It just accrues.
That's a big one. Yeah. That's a huge one. Now, just further to that, the tenant and the landlord may agree for the tenant to leave before the end of the lease because the tenant can't afford it. So they're in a 3-bedder. They're paying $800 a week. It may be in the tenant's best interest to go to a 1-bedder for $400 a week, and it may be in the landlord's best interest to let them go and find a new tenant. Can that be done?
It can be. So the new, the amendments to the Residential Tenancies Act deal with break fees, and whereas previously they were additional terms, they're now regulated terms. So you've got set break fees now that are quite advantageous to tenants. So if
even now, given what's going on,
or
is that negotiated?
In comparison to what they were, they're a lot better now for a tenant. But I think that anyone that thinks long-term moving forward that they need to vacate premises and move into something cheaper, they're decisions that they need to be making now and early on, because we go back to this premise that the debt keeps building, and even though it may not be necessary to pay it now, it will be there later on. So you want to get on top of it. deal with it now.
That's phenomenal information. You can't find this info anywhere, right? People are Centrelink's getting slammed. We've been getting slammed. I'm sure every other real estate agent is
everywhere, and I got no one that puts it all together. I get that information. So it's great to hear it all.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Just a few little things just in relation to NCAT. Procedural directions have actually issued today. So we're talking about very up-to-date information. Of course, it changes every day, but if you've got property managers watching today, they should be aware that one of the things that have changed is that any existing orders, procedural directions as to evidence that are going on, so submissions in reply or evidence about the bond dispute, can no longer be served over the counter at NCAT. It's to go via email or to be posted. Email is probably the best option for real estate agents, but there are some size limits as to what they can send. But I think it's 18 meg, so it's pretty big. So agents should just be aware of that to keep existing matters on foot. As a separate issue, we spoke earlier about interstate parties. So if a tenant is in dispute with a landlord here and they're a resident interstate, then the federal diversity jurisdiction is applicable, and those matters should be heard through the local court. Now, the Downing Centre, which is the main local court in Sydney, has actually vacated all the hearings until October. So
wow.
You're not going to get anywhere for a while.
For quite some time.
Just a couple of questions from the people that are watching. I've got the screens up here.
Yep.
A gentleman called Greg Jemmeson says, "I love you, Bubby, Wubby, Bubby, Wubby. I'm so proud of how you're talking."
That's my man.
Greg, Mark's watching.
Oh, you mean Greg?
Oh,
you mean Steve?
I feel
Is he saying that to
emasculated.
me?
So that's
name is
Lisa's
Steve.
husband. That's Lisa's husband saying he feels emasculated. So that's
not my husband.
that's
The
hello from
other
him.
lady.
And another question we've got is from Vanessa Barry Property. So if you accrue, this on Instagram, if you accrue, say, $800 in total, then a separate arrangement can be made to pay the shortfall lump sum.
Yeah. So the answer to that is it's like doing a payment plan. So if you go into NCAT, Vanessa, and you're trying to terminate a tenancy, on the hearing notes that the agents complete, it'll ask, have you entered into a payment plan? It's a standard thing with NCAT before all of this COVID-19. So that payment plan just follows the ordinary process.
Okay.
So it'll just accrue afterwards. But I think the benefit of the payment plan is parties sitting down and just talking about what's achievable and how that would look like, what it would look like rather, at the end of the 6-month period.
Okay, great. Now, also, I think blondes have a
Careful now.
Always talk over the men, and I find that with my wife Lisa. Greg Jemmeson has asked that Steve be able to say something.
I don't know if Greg Jemmeson has standing here, Mark.
Lisa, I think you and I need to.
If it wasn't for our viewers, we'd have nothing.
I think, Lisa,
all right.
the two Lisas will take a vote.
Yeah. Look,
all those in favour?
Yes.
All right,
okay.
let him talk.
Oh, yours.
He's been so patient.
Okay.
All right, Steve, now you're going to be talking a little bit about what the Prime Minister handed down today. There's a massive relief package on its way. So we're going to be talking about that. Over to you.
So it was $130 million, which effectively means 6 million employees receiving $1,500 a fortnight. And the purpose behind the incentive is that the employer gets paid to maintain the employee's wage. So we have our employees as employers. We get $1,500 per employee to continue paying those employees for the next 6 months, up to 6 months.
Per fortnight. So $1,500 per fortnight will go to employees, full-time and part-time.
Correct.
Okay.
Regardless,
and that will be handed out by the employer.
Yes. So the funds will arrive from the the ATO, who have the systems in place already to, they have the employer's bank account details through the BAS arrangements. So they already have the relationship with the employer. So the ATO will provide the funds to the employer, who will then pay the employee on the regular basis as they do now.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I'm an employee and I have no money. Where do I go and when's it going to start coming?
Okay, so this is obviously just hot off the press.
Yeah.
Up until about 3 o'clock this afternoon, everybody was being told, stand down, or if you've been stood down, or if you are on reduced hours, then your option was to go to Centrelink. What the government has said late this evening was that clearly Centrelink is not going to be able to cope with those arrangements. So let's use the existing structure we have in place and start providing payments to an employer to continue paying their employees $1,500 a fortnight each.
And that's a substantial amount of money, right?
For up to 6 months, $130 billion.
Yeah. Okay.
Now that applies to employees that have already been stood down.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
It's massive.
Can you say that again?
It's massive. So if you've already stood somebody down because you don't have any work, instead of those people now going to Centrelink, your employer, once you register with the ATO, and I imagine the ATO will be scrambling to set up systems.
Yeah.
But you will register your number of employees, and stand down. If we just talk about stand down employees for the moment, stand down employees will receive to the employer $1,500, which we will then pass on.
Right.
To the employer.
Is that
to the
more
employer.
than the unemployment subsidy that's actually there now? So does that mean that if you have lost your job, you will be paid more than someone who didn't have a job before?
So I think sorry, go on. No, you, Steve, go.
So if you were employed at 1 March, and as a result of what's occurred over the last 4 weeks, you are now in a position where you're financially disadvantaged, whether that be because of stand down or because of loss of hours, you are eligible to go back to your employer and say, I now need to receive this job keeper allowance, and the employer will apply to the Australian government via the ATO, and the ATO will pay $1,500 per employee per fortnight, which employers will then distribute to their employees.
Okay.
So
So
if I was paying someone $1,000 a week and there's $750 subsidies coming in, does the employer only have to pay $250 on top?
No, if the employee has been stood down on the basis that there is no work, then the maximum entitlement is $750, which replaces what the employee would have received if they went to Centrelink, which would have been $200 less.
Got it.
okay. Now this also applies to casuals as well, doesn't it? So it's not just for full-time and part-time employees. I believe it applies to casuals as well.
It applies to casuals. You have to meet the criteria, and of course we're continuing to release further guidelines. But the important one is that you mentioned part-time employees, and an employee who may be working two days a week who has been stood down will be entitled to the $750.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't mean to sound rude here, but if there's these sort of entitlements coming through, why would there be a problem in paying rent? When you consider the entitlements coming through that you've just spoken about that are currently also on offer previously, and then when you consider you cannot go and spend it at the TAB, you cannot go and spend it in a restaurant, you cannot go and spend it on travel, you have to spend it at home. That's a lot of money to be staying home.
I think and this is obviously a changing conversation, changing dynamic, and this announcement today provides the property industry with a new argument, a new discussion that they must have, which is around the financial hardship argument, which is if you are now getting $1,500 a fortnight, I think the conversation needs to change.
That's a game changer. So landlords can feel a little bit easier based on what this new news tonight.
Absolutely.
So,
$130 billion, that's 6 million people getting $1,500 a fortnight. And the purpose of that payment is to allow for them to continue to be housed and for essentials.
which is super important, right? I mean, you can see the panic, you can hear the panic. I mean, we're dealing with it as well, you know, on many respects, not taking it away from nurses and doctors, God, definitely not. But we're also on the front line because we're an essential service too, Steve. You know, we're dealing with people's homes. And so when you've got frantic people calling up saying, I can't pay my rent, I'm going to have nowhere to live, what do I do? Help me. And we're just like, I know, guys, we're trying to, but we're also not the bank. We're not the government. We're waiting on this advice. This is kind of the sort of information that we've been waiting on so that we can say, don't worry, there is some relief coming. The government is going to be giving out these $1,500 a fortnight payments. And so you will be able to pay your rent. You know, these guys, it's so important. People need to have a roof over their head. That's as important as food and water, right? Yeah. They're essentials.
It's part of the package that the government's delivered amongst a range of other financial incentive services. And this is obviously the most important to allay some of the fears that everybody has had around their financial situation and how they're going to cope over the next 6 months. $1,500 a fortnight is basically to provide for housing and food. That's what it's there for.
That's right. A lot of toilet paper, Steve. That's a lot of toilet paper.
Yeah, and as Mark said, there's not a whole lot of stuff that we can go out and consume, right? I mean, everything's shut. Restaurants are shut. Movies are shut. You can't shop. You can't, you know, there's nowhere to go. And even for us girls, you know, there's hair, nails. I mean, all that stuff. It does all add up. And so that's all, everything's just come to a
Greg's still watching, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really cost much at all.
Where did you go? Where did Lisa go?
I'm here.
She's back. She's back.
I'm back.
Did you go and ask Greg if you looked okay?
Hey,
no,
what?
she went to go and make sure Greg was okay. She went to go and make sure Greg was okay.
Yeah. I was doing billables. Some poor client was just getting slugged for this interview on Novak.
Okay.
I'm joking.
I got a question from one of the viewers, Mr. Tony Quattreville. Casuals have worked for 12 months plus. Any stood down from 1st of March? That's not a question, that's a statement. My apologies. Some casuals will receive more money than what they were earning before. The business must show a 30% drop in turnover so we can register. I think you were saying, Steve, before, people aren't really going to struggle with showing that downturn in rev.
I'd be hard pressed to find any one of my clients who are standing down people can't show that the reason why they've been stood down is because of that drop in turnover.
Steve, can I ask something? I believe these payments aren't coming through until the 1st of May and they are going to be backdated to today. So we're at the end of, I can't think of what the date is right now. I think it's the 30th of March.
Yeah.
What are people going to do for the next 4 weeks? What do they do?
Well, yeah, great question. We don't have the information from the government as to what is expected to happen between now and May. Whether it be employees continue down the path that they're currently pursuing, which is government settling payments, or whether the employer continues to make payments to them in recognition that they will receive payments from the first week of May. That's a detail that we will probably get over the next 2 days.
Okay, so let's go to look at rents. As my rent's due, let's say my rent's due tomorrow. I got no money to pay it, and I'm not going to get this money from the government rather, in my bank account until the 1st of May, which is obviously going to be backdated.
Yes.
Is that the negotiation part that they're talking about between tenants and landlords?
Yeah, great question.
and I think it is the negotiation part, because we just don't have that detail yet as to who is expected to stump the bill between now and 1 May. Is it the employer, or is it settling through the normal processes that we were expecting people to follow? We don't have an answer to that. I would expect it's a combination of both.
One thing I do want to stress to everyone tonight that's watching, that I'm really passionate about, there are no free rides. If you look at any of the stuff that's been put in place, we are all going to be paying for this in the future. As a community, as a nation, as a government, all of this stuff is full circle. So I think that, when there was these announcements made on interest rates, and when there was these announcements made on what banks were doing, a lot of people like, this is great. No, no repayments. The banks haven't lost a cent. The banks haven't said 2.5% interest rates are going to 0.5. We're going to do that for you because you're in trouble. The banks are just putting any money that they're going to potentially lose now to later, and that exact same model, by the sounds of it, is going to be adopted by landlords by what's coming through. Just, if you've got a fair case, take it to your bank and see what they can do. If you've got a fair case, take it to your landlord or to your agent to take to your landlord and see what they can do. It seems like that's the message from government the whole way along. And any of the Centrelink payments, we had a talk about it before off air. I had a client say today, there's going to be probably a corona levy in about 3 or 4 years, saying, pay your debts, guys. We've got this corona levy to pay for the cleanup.
Well, someone's got to pay for it. Where's all the money coming from? Where's all the money coming from? Of course. Well, right now we've got to get ourselves out with emergency money.
Sorry, Lise.
No, I was just saying, like, right now, the government is getting us out of this horrendous situation with emergency money that we're all going to be paying for in the long term. But right now, eyes on the pie, and we've got to, just do whatever we've got to do to keep all of our heads afloat, right? That's what they're looking at right now. And can I say, for whatever it's worth, I'm definitely not a political person, neither is Mark. We were just having this conversation before with Steve and Lise. I know everyone's got their own views, and I'm not asking for anyone's views. This is my opinion. I think they're doing a friggin' awesome job. I would not in a million years want to swap shoes with these guys. All the experience in the world cannot lead you to where we are now. There is no preparation for where we are now. These guys are not trained for this. They're thinking on their friggin' feet as we go. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. I really do. Like, hats off to them. I'm sure we've got Scott Morrison watching.
So I'm sure he's watching. I'm sure. So the takeaways tonight, guys, from the top. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask on your comment section. Share with your friend if this can help them. But to take it from the top, Lisa, Lisa Jemmeson, you started. In summary, what are the takeaways from what you mentioned?
Okay, so you're a landlord or an agent who's acting on behalf of a landlord is not going to be able to terminate a tenancy for non-payment of rent for the next 6 months.
Yep.
So we're encouraging landlords and agents and tenants to sit down with the other party and try and negotiate through and put into place a payment plan that will get them through for this next 6-month period. For landlords and for agents that are watching, you can still bring an application to NCAT and be heard if the premises are being damaged. Similarly, for tenants that are watching in a residential premises, they can bring urgent orders against a landlord if the premises are unsafe. And NCAT will continue to hear any matters where a residential or a retail tenant is locked out by the other party. So really the big takeout is talk to each other, negotiate. It's not a rent-free period for 6 months. The debt still accrues and people will be out litigating on these debts after the 6-month period. So be sensible, try and do a deal and try and negotiate around it to get through this period. But big thing is the debt doesn't go away. And think of it like a mortgage debt. It doesn't wipe, it continues. So
Yeah.
do best to try and put some money off the rent debt. Sit down, have conversations with landlords, have conversations with your agent, and try and work out something that will get you through. I think that's really, just in summary, the most important part. The other thing I'd just say for agents that are watching, you make money on rent that comes over your counter or comes to you. So you get a percentage of the rent. Now, it's reasonable to say that rent collection is going to be down. So reach out to your landlords and tell them that you're going to stick with them. Because by stick with them, I mean keep an account of what rent is owing, keep a close eye on the property, that the lawns aren't super high and there's no issues with neighbours. You're going to be performing your services and not being paid in essence for it. Remind landlords that you're there for them and that you're supporting them, and you too are taking a hit through this time, because that's important as well, I think, for agents. And many agents have reached out, certainly to our firm today, saying, how am I going to do this if I've got people stood down? And we've stressed the importance of swings and roundabouts. So in these coming months, you're not going to necessarily have the income coming in, but it's time to step up. And this is where our diamonds shine. Okay, so put the extra work in and do what you do. And that's what separates the great agents from the people that are just passing through.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I'm going to have a drink for that.
One of the best real estate agent property legal firms in Australia.
I agree.
Lisa Jemmeson, thank you. That's great advice.
Phenomenal advice.
And also in partnership, the same firm, accounting firm, Steve Fisher. What are your takeouts to finish off on what you've spoken about tonight? Lisa, you can't drink alcohol while you're...
My main takeout is that for the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've been speaking to many clients about the fear of financial fear of what's going to happen. And I believe that today what we've seen is a really significant announcement that is going to, it should allay a lot of people's concerns about how financially they will survive through the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And on the back of that is, how am I going to pay my debts and my bills on the way through? Well, I think from a financial perspective, I think today's announcement has really done a lot to try and allay some of those concerns that we all need to take away and keep in mind when we're talking to each other as employers, employees, landlords and tenants.
So just again, Steve, where do people go to get the $1,500 a fortnight? Because I think that's going to be the question a lot of people are going to be asking. Employees, where are employees going to go? They're going to be handed down by their employers. Yeah,
sure. Good. The government's advice is that the employer will have to register with the ATO to receive the $1,500 payments. So the employees, existing, former, stood down, whatever position you're in, need to talk to your employer about their entitlement to register via the employer. So the employees don't have to do anything. The employer will have to register with the ATO. The employer should be seeking out the assistance of their accountant, their long-suffering accountant, and get them to assist them in that registration process, so that they're ready to go as soon as those payments start coming through at the beginning of May.
Amazing. Okay.
And just
good advice.
A viewer called Greg Jemmeson has said, great content.
He's got both. I
don't know if he means great, his content, or great content. I think it means he's content. So your husband's happy, Lisa.
Mark, ask him how many scotches he is in at the moment, because I know it's past bedtime at our place. So I know the kids are asleep now. So.
Greg, Greg, there's that question towards you. And Greg Lisa Novak, to sign off, what are your takeouts from tonight, please?
Look, I think, It's been very stressful for everyone. I think that, don't think anyone's come out of this unscathed. Everyone has, everyone will. And the Prime Minister himself said everyone is going to play a part in this, and we sure as hell all are. We've never worked so hard in our entire lives, because if we're not, right, Mark, from stressed landlords and tenants and people that urgently need to sell and people that have their properties on the market and worried about property prices, we're talking about our own family and our own business model and what's going to happen. So everyone is doing their best. I think we are, we're week 2 now into COVID. I think we are. I think we're in some respects getting used to this weird kind of normal. Not used to it, that's not a good word, but we're starting to get our heads around it all. And I think we're doing a bloody awesome job. I think credit where credit's due. Give the Prime Minister a break. He's doing a friggin' awesome job. And so is everyone. We're all doing our part. So I just want to say, well done. Congratulations to everybody.
Well, the pat on the back, everyone. And my takeout from tonight, guys, and what I'm hearing all around is there are no free rides. So as a tenant, as a landlord with mortgage-free 6 months, whether you're getting the money from Centrelink or you're not, it's all coming back. So don't consume too much of these entitlements, because we are going to be paying for them in the end as a community. And let's just live a simple, healthy life. Be nice and positive. Get through this. And I look forward to the COVID levy that will be coming one day, if it comes. What do you reckon? What do you reckon, Mr. Accountant, Steve?
Yeah, 5%.
It's going. Anyway, that's later. Who cares about later? Let's just get through now. We've got plenty of
guys,
stuff.
I just want to say thank you so much, because we brought these guys on at very, very short notice. Like, this is information that we cannot find. No one can find anywhere. I don't even know where to start, to try and find this info. So thank you so much.
Yep.
We love the Novak, so anytime.
Thank you, guys. We love you too. And take care of yourselves as well. I hear this works, Lise.
Oh, awesome. I'm on it.
We decided it'd be a good idea to have a drink. God knows we all need it.
There is a rumor out there about this stuff called rakia. It does have magic things that it can do with health. So rakia, the Serbian Slivovitz.
But does that make you the most beautiful man in the world, or most interesting man in the world?
Interesting man in the world, together with Greg Jemmeson and Steve Fisher, signing out, everyone.
Thank you very much.
People, thank you so much. Love you guys. Everyone, I hope we helped you. Please share this if you can help a friend with this information. See you guys.